This is the New Writer Podcast. I'm Matt Brotherton, and each week I detail my journey as a storyteller in hopes it encourages other writers struggling to live their dreams. Show notes and videos can be found at newwriterpodcast.com. And now, here's the show. Welcome to the New Writer Podcast, episode 27. I'm your host, Matt Brotherton, author of the Seven Keys Saga and other works of speculative fiction. Today is July 24th, 2015, as I'm recording this, and it has been a crazy week. July has been a really busy month for me, mostly because I've gotten a lot of stuff done. In addition to relearning how to write HTML and Bootstrap this month, I've also learned how to use dictation software for the first time in my life. And it has been just insanely efficient for me. This week I've managed to do about 32,000 words for the week, which is not quite 10,000 words a day, but if you'll notice, that averages out to more than 5,000 words a day. So, well, not quite, because I haven't actually sat down to write tonight yet. I will knock out another 5,000 words tonight. I have not had a single night this week where I have not written at least 5,000 words, which is just great for me. Sales have been sales. This week I put the Alcohologist Chronicles on KDP Select. Well, actually, 2 weeks ago I put the Alcohologist Chronicles on KDP Select. If you're not familiar with that, I don't blame you. No one is. But a friend of mine, Yeti Detective on Twitter, and I decided to do a webcomic about 10 years ago. And neither of us really have a significant amount of drawing talent. I am at best a doodler, and that is being kind of gracious to me as an artist. But we had a pretty good story and some fun characters, and we decided we wanted to put it together. So when I started publishing last year, when I put out Choices, Yeti Detective and I decided to take the stories we had planned for the Alcohologist Chronicles webcomic that never really got off the ground and turn them into a serialized story. Turn them into a serial. We wrote 6 episodes, and they're not particularly great, and if you read them, you are definitely going to hell. There is no redemption possible for Chris and I for having written them. So, be warned. But I decided, since we hadn't really had any sales since the very first month we put the books out, that I would go ahead and throw them into KDP Select and give it an experiment to see what it's like. Try to get a feel for what the word count, the page count program they've got going on is, which was pretty interesting because each of those is 30 pages. They were written to be about the same length. They all should be about 30 pages. They're all about 6,500 to 7,500 words. And KDP actually runs the gamut from 39 pages to 43 pages on them. So it's hard to tell exactly what they're using to determine what a page is with Amazon. So if you're considering going into KDP Select, that's something you might want to take a look at. So far, I haven't sold any copies, but we've had a lot of downloads, because what I did was I put them into KDP Select, and then I set all 6 episodes of the series into 5-day-long free periods right after each other. So the first book was a couple of weeks ago, and we had, like 16, 17 downloads on that first story, the Glauschmier situation, which we thought would introduce our characters pretty well, although maybe a little too well. We might have gone a little too inside baseball on that one. Our second story, which is probably the second best of the lot, C is for Apocalypse. We had 17 free downloads on that, and the third issue, which is probably the worst, honestly, of the group, the Manchurian Candidate, just started its free downloads, and I've already got 7 of those. Maybe it will find its audience. The Alcohologist Chronicles is very, very niche. There's a very specific group of people out there who will absolutely love them. We couldn't even get an editor to work on them because they're just that, like, it's not that the story is bad, but, like, trust me, you have to be a horrible person to really enjoy them. I also, of course, had free downloads on Choices. Fewer this week than I did last week. I only had about 26 on Choices this week, which is slowing me down for the month. I'm only at 162 free downloads on Choices this month, and I've been pretty consistently hitting 200 each month. And I think part of that is the slow off from not having published something in so long. Now, the 5th book in the Seven Keys Saga series is on pre-order and does launch on August 1st. And I don't think the algorithm boost you get for publishing happens during the pre-order phase. I think you gotta wait for that publish date for that little, what they call the cliff boost. So maybe I'm kind of feeling that. I did have a couple of book sales. I sold a copy of book 2 and a copy of book 3 this week. So that brings me to a grand total weekly earning as a writer of $4.12. Now, that is pure profit at this point because I have sold enough copies of every book so far published in my series to pay for it. So that's the cost of the covers, the cost of a proofreader, all of that stuff. They all have paid for themselves. So I am at this point making profit entirely. So that is $4 in my pocket. Congratulations to me. Okay, so let's get into the meat of this week's podcast, which is research as a writer. One of my friends who is dipping his toes into the literary world, and one I am encouraging actively to try his hand at writing, asked me this week what research is for a fantasy writer. And I had to tell him, I was like, there's a lot of different types of research for a writer, and when you're speculative fiction, when you're on the Mohs scale of hard to soft, the softer you are, the less technical the research is, but there is still research involved, guys. There is no form of writing except for perhaps autobiographical and memoirs that don't require some kind of research. Personally, I think if I'm writing an autobiography or a memoir, I'm going to end up having to do research anyway, because I'm going to have to look up street names and stuff like that, because I just don't remember this stuff. But if you are a speculative fiction writer, or any genre writer really, there is a must-do first-step research for any writing project you're going to be involved in. You have to know the genre. And being a huge fan of the genre and reading the genre a lot really helps. And yes, that does count as research, guys. But you have to know it inside and out as a writer. You can't just say, I'm going to write this. I mean, well, you can. I'm not here to tell you, there are no rules to writing other than you have to write. Although, now that I'm using Dragon Naturally Speaking on a fairly regular basis, I'm not so sure you have to follow those rules either. You can dictate. So I guess the only rule to writing is you have to produce printed format work. But if you are trying to be a commercial writer, if you're trying to make money as a writer, and God knows if you're doing that, coming to me for advice is probably not the greatest in the world. Obviously, $4.12 a month is not going to pay your rent, or $4.12 a week is not going to pay your rent, but I do know some rules. I've done quite a bit of research into this. I am learning this stuff. I am getting better as I go along, and one of the things I've learned is that you have to know your genre conventions. And fortunately for most of us, that can be easily done these days if you don't mind losing 3 or 4 years of your life to TV tropes. There is a wiki, tvtropes.com, and on that site you have all kinds of pages like So You Want to Write a Science Fiction Story, and it breaks down kind of some of the necessary tropes of the genre, some of the scene markers for the genre, things the audience is going to expect. Now, this is kind of really important, guys. You have to give the audience what they expect. And a lot of people will tell you that's not being original, but that's because those people are stupid. Do not trust those people. They are bad for you. Giving the audience what they want is the entire purpose of genre. And learning how to be original within those genre boundaries is the challenge of being a genre writer. I can't say that I have mastered that challenge. I am still struggling with it. I still want to master that challenge. I would like to one day be a pulp author, you know, pumping out 2 or 3 books a month with the, you know, exact same keys to them, but all of them being different. You know, I really would love to be that guy, but I'm not there yet. But I do think it is important to focus on that direction if you want to be a commercial writer. Now, if you don't want to be a commercial writer, if you're not in this for money at all, the answer to what type of research do I need to do is whatever you feel like doing, who gives a crap. But if you're trying to focus on that story building, the first step is to know what you're writing, and that is to know the genre well. So if you're writing a science fiction, you got to know, you know, where on the Mohs scale you want to be. And that's another thing. The Mohs scale, for those of you who don't know, is the science fiction scale of hard to soft. So basically it is the laws of internal continuity combined with the laws of modern understanding of physics equals your Mohs rating. So if you have warp drive based on the Alcubierre formula, you're probably lower on the scale than you think you are, even though that's real world physics, but you get a boosted back up if everyone's warp drive works exactly the same. That's kind of, it's very complicated. And the way I handle this, specifically for me, is I write the entire book and I put whatever the hell I want in there. And then in the second draft, I do research like finding out what type of sidearm a Secret Service agent carries, or the official title for the guy above a colonel. These are things I don't just know off the top of my head, but they go into my books. So I have to make sure when I'm going back through and doing the second pass on the book that I find those things out. If you're writing science fiction, my recommendation to you, and this is completely, you know, my personal path, your path might be entirely different, but my recommendation is to write your story, do whatever you need to make your characters interesting and your plot complicated, get all of that in there, and then go, now what science do I have to find to make this make sense? You might have to change things. If you want to be hard science fiction, you might have to go back and say, well, this can't happen, but I learned about this really cool science-y thing over here that could happen that would still fit into this plot. That is how I would handle that sort of situation. Other than that, I write urban fantasy, so a lot of my research goes into like Google Maps. Like, I lived in Springfield, Missouri for years and years, so I know it pretty well and I have a pretty good visual of a lot of things in my head, but I don't always necessarily know exactly where those things are in relation to each other. My sense of space has been corrupted by time. So I'd use Google Maps to figure out exactly where things are. For one example, one of the plot points in choices is the locations where certain things are happening. And when you lay it over the top of the map of Springfield, they form a symbol. And I already knew from where I had written the first draft where 2 of those 3 things took place in. And I had the third event taking place in a completely different location. But the triangulation of the symbol is how they know where that's going down at. So when I took Google Maps and put the symbol over the top of it, it just happened to work out perfectly with a real world location that would work for those scenes anyway. And that's another thing that I do. I do that quite a bit. I pick locations that I want and fit them into what I need them to fit into. So that is my research rant for this week. I will actually start I will start into some pretty serious research here pretty soon. I am 15,992 words into the 70,000 word space opera that I'm working on. So far, because I am using dictation, it is all dialogue and little tiny bits of action. So I am expecting when I go back through my next pass, my description phase, that 16,000 words will actually be more like 32,000. So I'm getting about halfway to where I want to be in the story. I'm hoping that word count works out that way. If it doesn't, I actually have an entire next set of plot points from a different character's point of view that I haven't woven into that story yet. And the reason for that is because I was trying to keep it concise to fit into my idea of serializing the audio on Podiobooks. So it was going to be these chunks, and the story arcs were written to be 7,000 words. But very early this week, actually on Sunday, that first chunk hit 10,000 words, and I was like, I haven't even started making this, good yet. This is just dialogue and a little tiny bit of things like they all fall down, that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure exactly how long this book is going to end up being. Like I said, I already removed a plot point set that I was going to do, that I might just end up, if it feels right, I might end up mixing all of that back in on the next draft and just making this book be like 120,000 words if it has to be. I'm really enjoying writing the space opera, and the dictation thing is really working out for me. I also have been doing a little bit more research, because one of the things on my list was to write more nonfiction, and for me, nonfiction means humorous essays. And so I've been trying to make sure that I do that, and I will be posting those on my actual blog, mabrotherton.com. I posted the first one last night. It was my incredibly clickbaity title was how 5 reasons being in your early 30s is like the new puberty. I had a lot of fun writing that. I intend to do that at least once a week from now on. That is kind of part of my secret project, is the every week I will be putting something out on my blog. It will either be a nonfiction humorous essay or a short story that I'm working on. There is another piece to that puzzle that will be coming hopefully in August. I don't want to talk about it too much yet, but hopefully I'll be ready to go next Friday when I do the recording for next week's update. So check back with me in a week and we'll see where I'm at. Anyway, that's about all I've got right now. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for watching. Be sure to check us out on iTunes if you're on YouTube. Be sure to check us out on YouTube if you're on iTunes. And of course, you can always go to newwriterpodcast.com. Show notes for this episode are at newwriterpodcast.com/27, and you can get exact numbers on my word count and stuff for this week there, as well as links to any books I mentioned in the episode. I also have added a feature to the New Writer Podcast page that just has all of the YouTube videos, so if you're an audio listener and you want to see my pretty face, you can go and check that out too. Anyway, thank you guys, and have a wonderful week. Thank you for listening to the New Writer Podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe on YouTube and iTunes. We welcome reviews and appreciate your feedback. If you have questions or would like to be on the show, please email us, contact@newwriterpodcast.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Have a nice night.